Amazing. I'm going to add on two more friends. All right, let's go ahead and dive on in. I'm Taylor Harrington, your head of community, and I am so excited to have you here with us today for a session that is going to be both incredibly inspiring and also refreshingly practical, especially if you've been curious to step into the world of public speaking. We are joined by the wonderful Tianna Faye Soto, a nationally recognized keynote speaker, wellness journalist, and former editor of Women's Health, who has built a powerful speaking career rooted in purpose, clarity, and confidence. Tiana's work has been featured in outlets like CBS, Girl Boss, and Well and Good, and a touring keynote speaker. She has helped audiences around the country overcome perfectionism, spark creativity, step into their inner voice or into their voice. And she is also bringing together psychology, storytelling, and real world experiences. So today, she is here to demystify what it actually takes to become a professional keynote speaker. So whether you are exploring how to find your voice and story and how that can translate into public speaking opportunities as a founder or as a corporate employee, this session will give you a clear beginner friendly roadmap for understanding the industry and taking initial first steps without needing to feel like you're already known. So, Tianna, we are so thrilled to have you here with us. Thank you for contributing to the D&D community in this way. I feel like every time I do one of these intros, I don't know if anyone is watching the latest season of Queer Eye. It's the final season, but I always feel like I'm like Jonathan Van Ness in the car, like going to whoever's house it is and being like, and that's the pun to end the intro. So that's sort of how I feel doing this. But Tianna, we're so excited to have you here. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. If you have a little confetti emoji that you want to sprinkle as we welcome her onto the virtual stage, please go for it.
Hi, everyone. Oh, thank you so much for being here. I am actually blown away at the response to the signups for this event. So thank you for being here. Can everyone see my screen? This is that fun part where I get to make sure that hopefully you're not seeing the folders on my desktop. So hopefully that's not the case. But thank you all for joining me, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are calling in from. I'm currently in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we're getting ready for Super Bowl this weekend. The energy is high. So I don't know if any football fans out there. I'm a Bad Bunny fan personally, so I'm really excited for the halftime show. But all this to say, this is not a Bad Bunny presentation, unfortunately. I'm really excited to get to chat with you about the world of keynote speaking. And I fully recognize that maybe there are some people on the call who are brand new to this world, and maybe some of you have been speaking for a long time and want a little bit of a refresher. So we're going to try to keep it as beginner friendly as possible, like Taylor said, as practical as possible. And hopefully, we'll have some time at the end for questions as well. I'm going to be going through the program pretty straight through. So if I miss something in the chat, don't worry, I will come back to it and I'll try to toggle back and forth. And I'll also give you my contact information so that anything that doesn't get answered in this program, we can chat offline about. But we'll dive in. Thanks so much for being here. So I know you heard about me just a second ago, but just to reintroduce myself, my name is Tianna Faye Soto. My pronouns are she, her. I am a keynote speaker, journalist, and former editor at Women's Health magazine at Hearst in New York. If I have any media friends out there, hello. I also identify as a Puerto Rican and Jamaican Chinese woman. So my dad's Puerto Rican, my mom is Jamaican Chinese. My identity is a really personal part of me and my story. And I grew up in an area of North Carolina where there were no Puerto Rican, Jamaican, or Chinese people at the time. So trying to figure out, my narrative and how I fit in and walk through the world has always been a really big part of my story. But again, here's my contact info. I'll leave it for you at the end as well. And so excited to get to know all of you. So I'm originally from North Carolina. Currently, I'm living bi-coastally. I know it's such a funny word, between New York City and the San Francisco Bay Area. So quite opposite coasts, but I'm enjoying it so far and miss New York dearly. But was telling Taylor before this, I don't necessarily miss the snow and the ice. So I really feel for all of you on the East Coast right now. I'll be there in a few weeks and we'll probably get a taste of it. In terms of my academic and professional background, I studied clinical and counseling psychology in graduate school. I was kind of on a path to become a therapist. I have big love for anyone in the mental health space and great respect for what you do. So I studied psychology, and along the way in my career, became certified in some mind-body modalities like yoga, mindfulness, Reiki, somatic anxiety coaching. Was really fascinated by the connection between the mind and the body and how we can combine those things to feel better about ourselves and about our lives. And over the years, I've had a pretty winding career path. So I started out in mental health. I've worked in clinical psychology research, mental health nonprofits. I worked in a substance use treatment center in New York City for a couple of years. And then somewhere along the way, got the idea to pursue my Devil Wears Prada dreams and pivot into journalism. So, kind of wild, but I pivoted from mental health into magazine media and have worked as an editor and a writer for the past couple of years. And throughout that winding career path, picked up keynote speaking, which I did not know was an entire industry. It sounds cheesy, but the speaking world really found me. I did not set out to become a keynote speaker intentionally. I will say I grew up as a theater kid, so I was pretty comfortable younger on stage doing music and drama and things like that, but I had no idea that you could have a career speaking on stage as well. So we will demystify some of this throughout today's program. And again, super excited to have all of you here. So, for those of us who love an agenda, this is kind of a broad overview of what we'll be doing. Of course, there's a lot in between these bullet points, but we will broadly talk about what keynote speaking actually is, who is booking keynote speakers right now, like where are the opportunities to speak on stage. We'll talk about how to position yourself. Obviously, these things are a lifelong, I think, effort and journey, but this will give you a foundation for how to start if you're brand new to this. We'll talk about how to actually create a keynote speech. Like, what are you doing? What does the creative process look like? What are you saying up there for 60 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever you're being booked to speak for? We'll talk a little bit about outreach and pitching and positioning yourself, and then hopefully leave you some practical tips for how you can get started today and leave some time for Q&A. So definitely feel free to use the chat throughout. Again, if I miss something, I will come back to it, but we'll go ahead and dive in. So, what exactly is keynote speaking? Some of this might seem obvious, but I find that there's also some confusion sometimes about what it actually means to be a keynote speaker. So, typically, when someone says they're a keynote speaker as a job, they are talking about being the event-wide speaker at events. Usually, if you are booked to keynote speak, you are the opener, you're the closer, you're doing a lunchtime keynote maybe. Doesn't matter what time of day it is, but you are sort of the main event. My friend likes to say you're like the Beyonce headliner of a conference or a summit, right? So there might be a million speakers or facilitators that day, but the keynote spot is what everyone wants to go for, right? You are setting the theme and tone for an event. So maybe you're opening a mental health conference or a women's empowerment conference or something like that. And you're really responsible for getting up there and getting the crowd excited, setting the tone for what your experience is going to be. Now, typically when you're booked to do a keynote, it is 60 minutes. This is not the case for everyone. There have been times throughout my life where we've done maybe 45 minutes and then some Q&A. Sometimes if it's a really big conference, the keynote will be only 30 minutes or something really short. But typically, when you're booked and paid to speak for a keynote, I would say 99% of the time, at least from what I've seen, it is a 60-minute talk. In my opinion, a good keynote is always going to include a mix of storytelling, inspiration, and education. I'm sure we've all been in the crowd when someone is speaking and it's like, all education and you're like, okay, this is great. I learned a lot, but maybe you're craving a little bit of storytelling too, or inspiration. And I think some of the best speakers out there find a balance between those three things. The audience walks away learning something, having a new perspective on a topic, but also they get some stories. Maybe they laugh a little. Maybe they feel like you shared a heartfelt part of your own story with them, right? It's also a personal experience. So overall, there are many ways to speak, right? You can give a speech at your friend's wedding. You can go to a Toastmasters event. You can give a speech at your, conference for your job. You can speak up in a meeting. But in terms of keynote speaking, for the sake of today's program, we're talking about it as, a way to get booked, a great way to boost visibility, build credibility for yourself as an expert if you're trying to establish yourself in a particular field, and really grow your brand. Maybe you have a product or a business and you want to get the word out about that. Being a keynote speaker can be a great way to, share what you do with the world. I do want to call out that workshops are different than being a keynote speaker. So You very well might get asked to do both. I get asked to do both all the time. For instance, there will be a keynote in the morning, and then later in the day, I'll give a workshop that's more of a breakout session with a smaller, more intimate group of people where we're doing skills and practical things. But a keynote is really big picture, inspiration, story, education, setting the tone. And a workshop is usually going to be more focused on skills, practicing things, very hands on. Maybe you have discussion prompts, you're breaking people out into groups. So while they can go together, and you can certainly use this program, the advice in today's webinar for both, they are two distinctly different types of speaking and events. So, a couple of common speaking myths that I hear all the time that I just want to call out and debunk right now. Myth number one, you have to be the smartest person ever in your topic area to be a keynote speaker. This is not the case. And I am sure, my friends, that you've been in the audience of a speaker who was probably not the smartest person, right, in their topic area or at the top of their field. I'm not saying you shouldn't go in there, and just free for all and not have any knowledge of what you're speaking about. Not what I'm saying. But if you ever have an inkling of that imposter syndrome come in and say, like, oh, who am I to speak about this topic? What do I know? Or why would anybody want to hear me speak? I promise you, you don't have to be at the top of your field or the smartest person ever in your topic area. That's a really big myth that I hear. Of course, again, you want to have some baseline knowledge and be able to have the respect of who you're speaking to, right, with your skills. But you don't have to be at the top of your field. It's okay, and there's enough room for all of us to give speeches that are impactful. Myth number two, you need to have a jaw-dropping life story. When I first started speaking, I was surrounded by really cool speaker friends who had these awesome stories. One of my friends, two of them actually, two speakers I know, were on American Ninja Warrior and had these like amazing comeback stories and experiences. They were on TV. I know someone who was on Survivor, who's won, a million seasons. I have one friend who was in a really big near-death experience, and that's kind of the basis for her story. So I used to think, oh my gosh, what do I have to share? Like, what is something crazy, groundbreaking about my life that people would find interesting? And I promise you don't have to have that shock factor to be a good speaker either. In fact, some of the best speakers I know tell stories about the most ordinary things. One of my favorite speakers tells a story about how her husband brought home Italian food and dropped spaghetti all over the floor in their kitchen, right? Like something very relatable and everyday. So you don't have to have this huge, I climbed Mount Everest journey to catch the attention of your audience. Myth number three, you can't have any stage fright. I promise that's not true. We all get nervous. Even the best speakers and performers in the game get nervous. I think you can learn to be a good speaker. This is a skill that you can craft. And if you get nervous, don't worry, there are ways to work through it. Myth number four, you need to be a celebrity or an influencer with a ton of followers. I hear this a lot as well. Why would someone want to book me? I'm just this, average person working an average job. Like we really like to discredit ourselves and we don't give ourselves enough credit for what we do in our lives, right? And I think whether you are a celebrity, an influencer, or just starting out in this field, there's room for all of us once again. And I don't want you to think that you have to be this famous person who everyone knows with this huge following to get booked as a speaker. I'm certainly not, and I get booked. This is my job. So, who books keynote speakers? This is by no means the only list of people, but fortunately for all of us on this call, there are a ton of opportunities to speak right now. You've got high schools, colleges, universities, anyone in higher ed. They're always bringing in speakers. Faculty, staff, teachers, right? Within the university and college umbrella, you have sororities and fraternities. If you were part of a Greek life organization in college, that should be one of the first people you reach out to, I believe, because they are always bringing in guest speakers for their students. There is a group for just about any demographic and any topic today. So women's groups, DEI, obviously corporations bring in guest speakers. You'll see a lot of ERGs or employee resource groups. If you are at a company, maybe you work a 9 to 5 right now, chances are there are some ERGs maybe at your corporation that maybe you're a part of, maybe you don't know, but maybe they bring in guest speakers and want people to come in and share their perspectives. Small businesses, sales teams, HR, you've got leadership events, banking and financial industry, customer service. You have an entire events industry where meeting planners are always looking for speakers for their events and offsites. You've got, manufacturing, agriculture, real estate. There's so many different things. There's an association for just about any topic. So if you go online and type in, I don't know, Association for Women in Media, Association for Truck Drivers in Wisconsin. I'm not even exaggerating. This is a client that my friends have had. So there is an audience for just about anyone out there. Your local chamber of commerce probably brings in speakers. Hospitality, health, fitness, healthcare, nonprofit. If you are, in a religious community or spiritual community, a lot of times there's opportunities there. Sports and entertainment, travel, tourism, visitors bureaus, you get the point. There's a lot of opportunity to speak. So, one of the top questions I always get is like, where do I start? Like, who would want to bring me? Fortunately, there are a lot of people who probably want to bring you, even if you don't have a background in the areas of these organizations or the people you're speaking to, they still want to hear from you. They still want to hear fresh perspectives. In fact, they'd probably love for someone outside of their industry to come in and share some wisdom with them. So I am curious, and I'll try to pull up the chat here, which of these most applies to your situation right now? I fully recognize maybe you'll be at like a 1.5 or a 2.5, but here are three kind of distinct areas that I like to think about with keynote speaking as a job. So first thing is I want to be a full-time keynote speaker making a living on stage. Maybe that is how you're feeling today. Number two, maybe you already have a job, you have something else you're doing, and you want to speak to increase visibility for yourself, your company, your brand. Or number three is, Tiana, I don't know. I haven't decided. I just showed up to the webinar. I'm learning, or maybe somewhere in between. So I'm going to pop over to the chat and just see who is dropping in their numbers. We've got a lot. Okay, so lots of twos. This is great. Twos, threes, ones. Love that, Ashley. Big picture is one, but right now three. I love that. And so many people say that, right? Like one is the ultimate goal. We'd all love to quit our jobs and, make a living on stage maybe, but right now we have a job. And I will say I have had many seasons of life where it's been different. I've spoken while I have a 9 to 5. I've had seasons where I've done only speaking. I've done seasons where I'm speaking and freelance writing, so kind of still working flexibly. But yeah, it looks like we've got a mix, lots of twos in here. So I'll try to keep that in mind too as we go through all of this. And the beauty of, having a job and having speaking as something that is accompanying your work is that you don't necessarily have to feel the pressure to quit everything and just make a living on speaking tomorrow. If that is your goal, that's also great. But I would just say that's a really nice thing to have. And it can give you time to get your feet wet and get practice and lots of leverage also in your current job for speaking opportunities. So before we dive into content and all that fun stuff, just want to remind you that your voice matters and the world needs your message. A lot of times people will come to me and say, again, what do I have to share? Why would somebody book me to speak? What could I possibly share with all of these smart people in the room? And why would they listen to me? I promise your voice matters. There's probably a story or an experience you've had or an insight that the world is just sitting there needing to hear. So maybe you're not sure what that message is yet, and that's totally okay. But if you're ever discouraged or doubtful or get that imposter syndrome, please know there is someone out there who desperately, desperately needs to hear what you have to say. So let's dive into creating your talk. What does this look like? Everyone's got a different creative process. When I first started, I definitely didn't follow a framework. I, in fact, drew inspiration from some of my past blog posts and some of my work in psychology and crafted a keynote that way. And I was fortunate, it got booked, and it still gets booked today, years later. So your creative process might be sitting down all in one session and free writing it and saying, all right, that's my talk. That's great. Some of you are like, I would never do that. I don't want to do a script. I just want some bullet points and I want to be able to riff. So I say this with the caveat that you will find what process works for you. But if I were to go back in time, starting from absolutely, baseline knowledge, this is what I would do to create my talk. So zooming out, if you could broadcast one message to the world, any message at all, personal, professional, a life lesson, a feeling, what would it be? Take a second and think about it. No wrong answers. And if you are comfortable dropping your ideas in the chat or any phrases or words that come up, I'd love to see what comes to mind when you see this question. If you could broadcast anything to the world, what would it be? Try not to overthink it. You don't even have to think of it in terms of speaking, but just what's something you want to share? What's on your mind today? Own your brand. Our mind is more powerful than we think. Postpartum moms deserve better. Change the energy, change your life. We can learn how to tell ourselves and the world better stories. These are all awesome. Addressing bias in AI. Do good while doing well. You're not alone. Hello, these are all keynote speeches right now that you are dropping in the chat. This is amazing. Work shouldn't hurt. I agree. That you don't really need to be the most knowledgeable person in the room to be seen as a leader. I love that, Eloise. So true. Financial literacy and women's financial empowerment is good for everyone. Share your dreams. I love it. Own your life journey. Protect the asset. Good mental health is your superpower. Persistence is key. Brand is an operation system, not a fluffy piece of marketing. Whew, powerful. We all have the power to build a better world. Absolutely. Optimize your wealth journey while minimizing taxes. Your career doesn't have to follow someone else's path. You can design work that fits your life, not the other way around. Love this. These are all fantastic. So please continue to drop them in. I'll try to keep shouting them out. But I want to, you to see all of these powerful ideas that you just came up with in your brain off the top of your head, right? You didn't overthink it. You didn't craft a whole keynote. You didn't dive into any of the content yet. That's what's on your heart. That's what's on your mind. Chances are, this is something that's going to be maybe part of your speech or your keynote or your messaging. It doesn't have to be the title or the overall theme, but chances are whatever you dropped in the chat, whatever came to mind first, whatever that gut feeling was, is going to be important as you craft your talk. So I love it. Continue to share. When you sit down to craft a talk, here are some broad questions you can ask yourself. What are you most excited about? What do people naturally come to you for? Is there something people are always emailing or DMing you about that they love getting guidance on from you specifically? On the flip side of excitement, what do you get fired up about? Is there something that gets you really angry? I had an advisor ask me that one time, and I thought it was such a smart way to think about the things we care about, right? Because we could get excited about something, but also what gets us really fired up? Maybe it's injustice. Maybe it's seeing women who don't believe in their own power or don't know how to own their confidence, right? Something that gets you fired up probably is really important to you. Is there a problem that you want to help solve for people or a problem in the world that you see that you think you can come help solve? What audience do you want to serve and why? This could be an evolving thing, right? These questions don't have to be answered overnight, but maybe you're a healthcare worker and you want to work with, new nurses or new doctors because you were once a new nurse or a new doctor. Maybe you built a business and scaled it and you want to work with young women who dream of starting their own business. Maybe there's an audience that speaks to you. Is there a transformation that you want to help others achieve? You can also think about it in terms of your own life, your own story. What makes your story unique? And I know, again, that voice might creep in and say, there's nothing unique about my story. It's just your everyday run of the mill. No, I promise there is something about your story that nobody else can say that they've experienced. So really think about those moments in your life. Are there moments that have made you who you are, that have been pivotal or important, or things that stick out when you look at, the timeline of your career, for instance? A way to think about this that I find really helpful is to just consider different moments in your life. This is something called sort of story mining. So, thinking about the stories in your life that you might pull into a keynote. That actually can be really overwhelming for people because they're sitting down and they're like, what do I say? What is something I can share that's going to be helpful? But really just zoom out for a second and maybe think of it in terms of these bullet points. So, was there ever a time where, for instance, you were challenged to do something or you were scared? Was there a time where you went through a big life change, a life pivot? Classic question. Tell us about a time you failed. But for some of us, that really speaks to us, right? Some of our biggest setbacks can be, those biggest lessons in our life. Maybe you did something brave. I love this one. Think of a time when you were the underdog or you felt like the underdog or a comeback story. Was there a time you learned a valuable lesson or you were wrong about something? Maybe you had a realization. Maybe you made an assumption about something at work or in your life or a relationship, and then later realized that that wasn't true. Maybe you learned something new or created something or accomplished something. Maybe there was a time you took a big risk in your life, whether personal or professional. You can also think of it in terms of what inspires you. Was there a time in your life where you did something for the greater good? And these are just little prompts to get you thinking. I want to remind us too that it doesn't have to be groundbreaking. It doesn't have to be intense. I put this picture here because one of the stories I tell in my keynote is about how way back in time when I was in high school, I joined the cross country team purely because my friends were doing it and because everyone said I should join a sport in high school. And I joined and was literally last place in every single run, every single race, crying, humiliated, as in people and parents are packing up the minivans to go home and Tiana's still out there running, right? Like I was slow and proud, my friends, but I was out there and it was such a hard moment for me. I was so embarrassed and felt so behind. And then fast forward to 2 years ago, and I ran the New York City Marathon on my birthday. And never in a million years would I've ever thought I could run 26.2 miles. Now, let's not get it twisted. It took me a long time, okay? I was out there for a long time. I high fived everyone. I pet all the dogs. I took a lot of selfies. It was so much fun. But when I use this story on stage, it's usually with people who are either doubting themselves. Sometimes I speak to first generation college students or folks who feel like they're really behind in their college journey. And I use this story to illuminate the fact that sometimes we think we're behind, but we're actually exactly where we're supposed to be. And we don't know how capable we are until we go out and try and do that big scary thing. So there are a lot of lessons that I've found in my running journey that could be stories that I use in my keynote. But just as an example, it doesn't have to be even something like that, right? It could be I left a job and took a risk, or I, went against what my family and friends wanted me to do for my career and I did my own thing, right? It could be literally anything. So just as an example. So again, everyone's framework and creative process will look different, but this is a really basic way that I think you can start to visualize your keynote and start to just boost that creative process of putting it together and ideating, right? So, first and foremost, I would say start gathering inspiration and stories from your life. Take a little time to reflect. It could be your career, it could be your personal life, it could be somewhere in between. I mean, there are speakers who talk about, divorce, they talk about grief and loss and find ways to tie that into, corporate topics. Like there is so much opportunity, I think, to harness your own personal story and use it for greater lessons and for the greater good. So think, what experiences would you be comfortable sharing with people? Is there anything that sticks out in your mind from the past couple of years or maybe when you were younger? Is there anything that stands out? You can also think of this as, is there a story you tell all the time that your kids love, that your family loves, that your friends love when you tell it? That might be a good indication too that there's something there if people love to receive that story. Another step that you can take is to identify 3 to 4 core lessons that you want to share in your keynote. And sometimes people do this in reverse. You might come up with the lessons first and the stories after. You could do the stories first and the lessons after. Again, it's really creative and based on how you feel. But I think any good keynote is going to have you walk away with a couple of core lessons, right? So get really clear on what do you want your audience to learn, understand, or walk away with from your talk. Maybe you want them to advocate for themselves in the workplace. Maybe you want them to apply for that job or go for that promotion. Maybe you want them to grow their business or grow their social media following or understand how to manage stress and burnout. Or there are, many, many different things that you could say here. But if you could distill maybe 3 to 4 lessons that you want them to walk away with, what would those be? And then over time, see if you can connect your stories to those lessons. Just like my running story can connect to a bunch of different lessons in my keynote, what is something in your life that could connect to one of your lessons? So maybe if you are in the mental health field and you talk about burnout, was there a time in your life where you were burnt out or stressed? Or maybe you're a therapist, maybe you worked with someone who was really burnt out and stressed. That could be an example too. It doesn't have to be your own. I always think your own stories are the most powerful, but you can absolutely use, a client example or an example in your business or at your job. There's so much there that you can work with that you probably don't even know is there. So see if you can find ways to connect those stories with those core lessons and which ones might fit best. I'll also say that as you get started on your keynote speaking journey and you work with different audiences, you will find that different stories land differently with different people, right? My running story is great for college students, but if I'm in a corporate setting, maybe I tweak it a little bit, or maybe the language changes a little bit. Maybe the lesson that I'm sharing is a little bit different, but I'm still using the story of running. So you'll fine tune and tweak as you go, but this I think is just a nice way to think about how to put your talk together. If you have that blank page in your notebook and you're like, where the heck do I start? This is a really good place to get started. So over time, you'll start to get comfortable with your stories. You'll tell them, you'll practice in the mirror. It's going to feel really cringe, but over time, you're going to feel more confident. It's going to be okay. Maybe you put a recording on your phone and do a voice memo and just ramble. Just start talking. Just start pretending like you're telling your friend the story. See how it sounds. How does it feel, right? You could even let go of how it sounds. If it makes no sense, that's okay. How does it feel to share the story? Maybe it's really scary for you. Maybe you're like, actually, this story about my breakup or my divorce, it still feels really fresh, actually. So I don't know if I'm ready to share that, right? You might have an experience like that. And that's really good intel as you're building your keynote. So record yourself. You can ask for feedback if you're comfortable. Go to an open mic. Share a story for 2 minutes. I promise your nerves will go away after you do that, because if you can do that, you can do anything. Repeat, refine, and just keep trying, right? This is not an overnight process, but it's all about repetition and practice. Over time, once you feel good about your couple of stories, you're stringing them all together, you will find that that hour has been filled between the intro, the conclusion, and your lessons and your stories. You'll have a full keynote. Kind of is hard to wrap your mind around at the beginning, but you will find a way to create that talk. And down the line, then you can create the title, the description. You can list a couple bullet points of learning outcomes to really package the talk. So again, this is like a hyperspeed timeline, but just know that it can be this simple, right? If you break it into these bits. So again, it can grow and evolve, but get creative. How might you package this talk? Who is it for? What, again, are those lessons, those key outcomes you want people to walk away with? And then eventually, down the line, we'll get to the point where we're pitching our talk to audiences, to clients, to organizations. Yes, this can feel super scary, but again, remember, the world needs your message, and it's a whole lot of trial and error. Just like any of you who are in a business or a job where you've got to be pitching, which is probably all of us in some capacity, you might hear no's, but you'll also hear a lot of yeses. So it's just about putting yourself out there and trusting that someone out there, again, really needs to hear your message. So again, couple of broad questions to ask yourself as you're crafting, as you're in this creative process. Reminder, it should be fun. Have fun with it. But you can think about it in terms of who is the ideal audience for this keynote. A lot of times people will say, well, Tianna, anybody can benefit. Anyone can benefit from this topic. That's great. I love that. That's great. That's a good outlook because that means there's a lot of potential clients for you. And at the same time, see if you can get a little more specific. If you speak about stress and burnout, that for sure can apply to anyone, but maybe it's especially powerful for students in college who are getting ready to graduate, or high level executives who are juggling a million things and trying to grow their business. Maybe it's for new moms who are wearing a bunch of different hats right now and could really use some tools for burnout prevention, right? So really think of your ideal audience members, knowing that you're not going to be speaking to those ideal audience members all the time, but if you have someone in mind, it's going to really help shape, I think, your keynote. How do you want the audience to feel during this talk? Do you want them to feel like they can get up on the table and cheer people on and clap and dance and feel awesome? Do you want them to feel grounded and calm and nurtured, right? There are many different styles of keynote speakers. My friends who were on American Ninja Warrior are a very different energy than some of my friends who, are therapists or have a different style. And from my style, for instance, I am not the person who's getting up on a table or bringing people on stage with me. Like, we're not doing that. So, know yourself, know how you want to hold the room and how you want people to feel in your presence. And you can also think of it in terms of, what do you want the audience to do after this talk? It's one thing to be inspiring and motivating, but in a perfect world, what would a woman leave your keynote and do after that? Would they apply for a job? Would they go for the promotion? Would they break up with their toxic boyfriend? Like, I don't know, whatever you speak about, right? What do you want the person to do? And that is also going to help inform what you share on stage. What's that transformation you want them to have? And then finally, a question I always return to in my career and encourage other folks to do as well is, how can I best use my story, my strengths, and my personality to be of service? That, in my opinion, is like the core question that every keynote speaker should ask. Because the truth is, yes, it looks like a cool, glamorous job. You're on stage, you're on the spotlight. Woohoo, all these people came to hear you speak. But it's really about service. It's actually not about you. And that could be a really tough pill for a lot of aspiring speakers to follow, because they do think that it's about them. Like, sure, you have to have a little bit of, confidence and healthy ego to stand in front of people and do this work. But at the end of the day, it's not about being liked. It's not about being listened to. There will be people who fall asleep. There will be people who are on their phones. Some of the, highest level executives might not be paying attention to you, right? And you kind of have to be humble in that way and say, you know what? I'm here to serve. I'm here to use my story and my strengths and myself to be of service. And whoever in the audience takes from my presentation, I trust they're going to take what they need. So All this to say, I think that's just a nice reminder as you're making this that you don't want to just be trying to be something you're not, but really lean into your own story and your own strengths and know your personality. Don't try to be something that you're not. On that note, don't create the keynote that you think the world wants. Create the one that's on your heart and makes sense for you and your life. I can't tell you how many times people are like, well, I'm going to talk about AI because that's like the hot new topic. That's great. If you love AI and you are deep in that world, go for it. But please don't talk about AI just because that is what is happening in the world, especially if you have no background or interest in AI, right? So start with your passions, your beliefs, your story. Do that first. Now, I will say, my speaker friend always likes to joke if your keynote is about like whale watching or something incredibly niche, understand that not every audience might have a need to book and pay for that particular keynote. Doesn't mean you can't talk about whale watching, but kind of find a balance between yes, there are things that the market is going to want. I think AI is going to be a very popular topic, especially the next couple of years in the speaking world, but that doesn't mean you have to change your whole brand and approach just because that's what conferences are booking. So start with you. And the other thing I'll say about this is audiences are smart. They can sniff out when you're trying too hard. They can sniff out when you are trying to be something you're not. So, in my opinion, always easier to just be yourself first. So we'll pivot now into outreach and pitching yourself. Again, I know this is like a long trajectory for a lot of us. It won't happen overnight, but this is one of the questions that I got asked when putting this webinar together. Like, how do you find gigs? How do you pitch yourself? How do you start? Because that can be very intimidating for a lot of us. The first thing I'll say is get excited and lean into your personal brand. This is a mood board I made for a project. By no means do you have to be a mood board person, but I am. I'm very visual. I think it's important to have an online presence that, portrays what you want it to portray. I I don't think you have to have the perfect brand or hire a graphic designer to make everything look gorgeous, but have fun with it. And if you are going to put yourself out there as a keynote speaker, think about it. What kind of energy do you want to put out? What are the colors that get you excited? What's that image that you want to start building? Again, by no means does it have to be perfect, but I think it could be really fun to just have fun with this and get creative. Another thing that I was told in my speaking journey that was really helpful is thinking about different speakers that you know and their styles. So maybe you have been in the presence of a speaker who is very academic, very technical, right? Very grounded. Maybe they stood in one place on the stage and delivered their speech really powerful. Maybe you were in the presence of someone who was all over the stage. They were wearing bright yellow. They had pink hair and blue glasses, and they were gesturing really wildly, right? We all have a different style. And I think that's the beauty of this is that you don't have to just stand at a podium and have the mic and deliver a speech. You can be yourself on stage. So think about it for you. If you were to reflect on your own image, your own life, do you fall into maybe the more academic category? Maybe you're very corporate. Maybe you're more creative and bold. A word that came to mind, someone was telling me recently that they feel that Brene Brown, when she speaks, it's more nurturing, right? She's bringing in science, but she's also sort of grounded and calm. Maybe you listen to, I don't know, Mel Robbins or a podcaster, right? They all have a different vibe about them. So you don't have to have a perfect aesthetic by any means, but I think it's helpful once you start putting yourself out there to think about, okay, what kind of event might I match and what vibe can I put out to match, the events that I want to speak at. So I could have explained that better, but I think I know what I'm saying. Just really thinking about your online presence, even your clothes, right? How you're showing up to meetings, how you're presenting yourself, it could be super important. So once again, when you start the outreach, before getting overwhelmed by where to look, remember, all these places are booking speakers right now. They're booking for conferences, for events, for meetings, for retreats. Your company probably is looking for speakers for something right now that you might not even know about, and you could raise your hand and volunteer to go speak there. They might not pay you extra, but you can get good footage and good photos and testimonials. So there's probably something out there that you can do right away. Where do you find them? Where do you look? First and foremost, sounds simple, but you got to do some research. Research opportunities online. If you're serious about keynote speaking, I would say set aside a few minutes at least every day to just look for opportunities, put them in a spreadsheet, put them in a Google Doc, something that makes you feel like you are, doing some outreach. I know that it feels really intimidating, but make a list of dream events. Maybe you want to speak at Nike or Athleta or whatever it is. And you're like, I wonder if they do anything. I wonder if they've brought in speakers in the past 5 years. Do some research, have fun with it, and dream really big about this, right? Like you can actually speak for these dream events. I have a friend who is speaking at South by Southwest, or maybe it's Create and Cultivate is like on your vision board or something, right? Go big and believe that you deserve a place on those stages. You can look for annual or seasonal events. Chances are there's an organization out there that does a conference every year at the same time on the same weekend. That's a really good place to look. Are they looking for keynoters? If they're not, are they looking for workshop facilitators? That's another great way to get visibility. Being a guest on a podcast, do not sleep on this. I think this is one of the best ways you can get speaking experience and visibility because you can sit at home in your pajamas in front of a microphone and not go anywhere and get experience. True story, earlier last year, I went on Threads and typed in, I think like podcasts or something, or call for speakers, and all these threads came up of women who had just started podcasts that were looking for guests. I pitched myself on three of them, got all three. So, like, truly, sometimes all it takes is putting your name out there and doing a couple minutes of research every day and seeing like, oh, maybe I'd be a really good fit for this, or I have something to offer this person's audience. You can appear on local TV and news. Maybe there's a segment. If you're a mental health speaker or a wellness speaker, maybe they do a recreation leisure segment on TV every Saturday morning or something, and they need someone to come in and talk for 2 minutes about burnout or stress management. Like you'd be surprised sometimes what these news stations are looking for, and it could be very simple for you. And then you get amazing footage of you on set on the news, and that could be used for your speaker assets. You can, of course, do social media, Instagram or LinkedIn Lives. Something that I like to do is set Google alerts for certain keywords. So maybe it's healthcare conference, women's summit, leadership training. Like you can get really nerdy about this. I will say you're going to get a ton of emails from Google alerts. So just be aware of that. You will feel like it's clogging your inbox, but this is what I do. I mean, I put it in, and then every day or every couple of days, I'll go through all those emails that I got and say, okay, is there anything that I should be applying for? Are there any dates I should be on the lookout for? Doing that research is really helpful. Call for speakers is another way to do this. Connect with your existing contacts. Start there. Make it really, easy. Chances are there's someone in your friend group, your family, your former coworker, or your former boss. Maybe they know someone that they can connect you with. Inquire at your workplace. Again, maybe there's an event going on and they'd love to just throw you in because it saves them the time and money of finding an external speaker to come in, right? They might love for you to raise your hand and do that. Attend and network at conferences. If you are at a conference and you're not speaking, it is still worth it to go because you can listen to the speakers, you could see the type of people that were booked, and then maybe you find the person who's in charge of the programming and say, hey, I loved hearing Gabby Bernstein speak today. I would love to find out more about speaking opportunities. Or are you going to do this conference next year? Like, how can I learn more? Keep it really organic, really kind, really pleasant. Don't bombard the person with all of your materials, like shoving your resume into their hand. I have seen this happen before. But, be bold, but also just it's a relationships business. So build the relationship and see what's out there. You can also speak at local Toastmasters events. Personally, I've never done Toastmasters, but I have heard great things about it, and my speaker friends do it all the time. In particular, my friends who are introverted or maybe feel like they identify deeply with the stage fright feeling. They love Toastmasters because the point of it is to bring people of all different backgrounds to just practice and cheer each other on. You can also apply for a TEDx. I will say I haven't done TED. I've done a lot of trainings on TED. I've had friends that do TED Talks. You can totally do this. My personal opinion is TED is not the end all be all of keynote speaking. It's a cool thing to have. It's obviously a really cool brand. If you've done one, it's going to boost your visibility. It's going to give you credibility. It's an amazing thing to do. But please don't think like, oh, I haven't done a TED Talk, so I'm not a real speaker. That is not the case. I will say the nice thing about TED is that every state and every event runs itself differently. They have independent teams running these events. So let's say in your town or in your state they have one, they are going to usually put out a call for the speakers, give you a theme for that year. And then, a lot of these TEDx events also say, we actually don't want professional keynote speakers. We want like everyday people, okay, that have cool ideas. So some are very explicit about that. So don't think, again, that you have to be established before applying to something like that. So I said this before, but this is a relationships business. A lot of people think that they can just go out and be like, I'm a speaker. Please book me, right? Which in a way is what you're doing, but you're also building relationships. Maybe it's with bureaus, maybe it's with event planners, meeting planners, conference coordinators, right? You're always building your network. And this goes for any industry, but especially in speaking, relationships matter. The world is very big, but the speaking world is also really small. A lot of us know each other. A lot of bureaus know each other. A lot of bookers know each other. So always be kind, always be professional. This is not something that needs to be said to this particular group at Dreamers and Doers, but you'd be surprised. Word gets around fast. So establish a nice reputation for yourself, and it's going to be much easier to get more gigs over time. Again, start with your own network. I would really lean in on LinkedIn. I know some people love and hate LinkedIn. I personally love it. I think it's where it's at. I think there are so many opportunities there. So make sure your LinkedIn is filled out. Put speaker in your header, in your bio. Put some logos in your header. I know Dreamers and Doers has great templates for this. That helped me put mine together. So just have a profile, make it really easy for people to find you, start posting on social media, even one post saying, hey, I'm getting into keynote speaking. You'd be surprised. People will be so excited for you and they're going to be like, oh my gosh, I know all these places where you can speak. And had you not posted, you might not know about those. So you can totally do that. Find relevant people and job titles. If you're looking for speaking opportunities, I would look for things like meeting planner, conference coordinator, event planner. That one can be kind of broad because you might get like wedding planners and things like that, which isn't necessarily what you're looking for. But start to narrow down certain keywords to see where you might want to connect with people on LinkedIn. Send them a nice, warm message when you connect with them. Always, always personalize your outreach. I don't know about you, my friends, but my biggest pet peeve is getting these like chat GPT written outreach notes. And it's like they clearly did no research on you or your background or what you're about, or, they think you're like working in tech and you're not. And I'm like, who is this bot, right? That reached out to me. So personalized. Do you have a mutual friend? Did they post something that you really loved on LinkedIn? Did you see something on their Instagram even that sparked something for you? Always personalize. It can be short and sweet, but try to make it as personal as you can. Also, try not to spam people. I know you're not going to do this, but just remember people are busy. So, by all means, follow up 2, 3 times, give it some space in between if you're, nurturing a lead or something like that. But also remember people are busy. One of the biggest things I hear from my speaker friends nowadays is that they'll send out an email in January and not get a ton of traction from it. And then later on in June or July, that event planner kept their information on file and is like, all right, now it's time to plan my conference. I remember this great email I got from Taylor months ago. I kept it and now I'm going to reach out to them. So know that the timing might also be a little bit different and don't get discouraged if you don't hear back right away. Make it really easy for people to find you online. As a journalist, I would say I have probably like 5,000 pitches in my email right now from PR, from authors, from therapists, from experts. They're amazing. I try really hard to get through all of them, but I can't. But my biggest pet peeve is when someone is pitched and there's like no links, there's no press kit, there's no attachment. I'll be honest, I don't really need a press kit. I think a website is totally fine, or at least one place I can find you on social media. But if I can't find this person online, I'm sorry, I'm moving to the next person because I need proof and social proof that the person is doing what they're doing. I need to verify their medical license. I need to see where they went to school. So, you don't have to have a huge social media presence, but I'd say make it easy for someone to find you because if they're going to book you, they're also putting their own job on the line, right? By bringing you in and they want to know that you're credible. Keep an ongoing list of contacts, goes without saying, but whether it's a CRM or a nice system or just an Excel sheet, always have people that you're connecting with and put notes, right? Like maybe they didn't respond, or maybe it's a warm lead, or maybe their conference isn't booking till November. So make a note for yourself to follow up in a few months. And again, consider those event timelines. Some events book a year in advance, right? So if you reach out 2 months before the conference, sorry, it's too late. Others, they're doing it right up until the last minute. So you might be right on time. A trick that my friend likes to use is if a conference just finished, write down the person's contact information and like put a reminder on your calendar because chances are they're going to start planning the next one pretty soon and they are going to be looking for speakers. So sometimes you might be too early, sometimes you might be too late, but know that everyone's on a different timeline. So, my challenge to you today would be to reach out to 3 people over the next week. It could be a former boss, a coworker, friend, family member. It could be a random person on LinkedIn that you just connected with that happens to be in the field that you are trying to speak in. Find 3 people, send them a nice, personalized, short and sweet note telling them who you are and what you do and asking how they're doing or whatever it is, and just see how that feels. And that I think will get you started on a little path of outreach. Sorry, I'm trying to pop over to the chat, but I'm mindful of our time too, so I'm going to keep going, but I will pull up the chat in a second and see what I missed. A couple of power statements you can use in your outreach that I think are especially helpful. I help audiences blank by speaking about blank. This is just like a really clear way to say what you do. I help audiences achieve their career goals by speaking about personal branding. I help audiences advocate for higher pay by speaking about financial wellness or whatever it is. Obviously, fluff it up, make it your own, but I think it should be super clear when you reach out to someone who you're trying to get booked by, what you do and how you can help people. Another way to note the transformation is after hearing me speak, audiences will blank. Maybe they'll have tools to grow their business or feel motivated or productive at work. Maybe they'll be inspired to take action or stand up for, rights in their community. Make it really, really clear what that impact is. Couple of helpful assets to have. Again, you will build and grow these things over the years of your life, so don't think this has to be overnight. Speaker website's really helpful. Always helpful for event planners to see who you are, what you do, what you offer. If you don't have a website, that's okay. If you have a website about your book or your business or something else, just add a tab that says speaking and add some topics you're available to speak about, a little bit about yourself, a nice headshot. That can suffice, right? As long as there's something there to indicate, okay, this person is offering speaking services. If you don't have a website, just have a LinkedIn profile or some other place, again, where I can find you online. A demo reel is a huge, huge asset today. We are in the age of video. We love video. I will say I am years into keynote speaking and I am just now getting my demo reel together. So this is a long journey, right? You got to collect footage. You got to maybe hire a videographer, someone to come to your event. So it's not an overnight project, but even a basic video can help. I met up with a friend last year and we filmed a video within a few hours of me sitting on a couch talking about my passion for mental health, put it on my website, and that can be a placeholder, right? You could even film it on your iPhone. Anything that's going to show people who you are, your voice, your tone, how you come off, that's going to be really important. An asset that's key for sure is going to be your keynote title, description, and learning outcomes. If someone wants to book you, they will be asking for these things. So, of course, it'll come later after you build your keynote, but have those on hand that way in case someone's like, hey, shoot me an email with your information. Like, you don't have to work hard, it's there. Any testimonials from people you've worked with. This doesn't have to be speaking testimonials if you're a beginner. This could be a past client. This could be a former boss. This could be, someone you've worked with in another way professionally. Any logos of companies you've worked with, put them on your website. That's really helpful. Any press mentions or places you've been quoted. Don't stress out if you don't have these things, but if you do and they're just sitting there not being used, put them up. You can also have this on your LinkedIn profile. There's a section of recommendations. So sometimes if you work with someone, you could request like, hey, I really enjoyed working with you, Taylor, on this webinar. Would you be open to providing a testimonial? And I'm happy to return the favor. You'd be surprised. People love to do this. So ask for testimonials, have a little speaker bio, and down the line, you can also have an introduction of how you would like to be introduced on stage. That can be really helpful for your event planner. Have some headshots and photos. Again, they don't have to be groundbreaking or professional, but ideally something that shows you're professional and trying to put yourself out there in the speaking world. They can, by all means, share some personality as well, and have a list of your tech needs and your AV needs for in-person events. Again, this comes later when you're getting into the nitty-gritty of booking, but maybe you need a speaker because you're a speaker DJ and you need to do your DJ set on stage. This is a real thing people do. Maybe you need glow sticks. Maybe you want the lighting to be a certain way, or you have, your PowerPoint and your clicker, right? So like these little things people don't think about. I think sometimes it's just nice and professional to have it on hand, and it'll be super impressive to an event planner who's bringing you in. Couple of resources that I really love in the speaking world. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but I have learned a lot from my friend Jess Ekstrom. She does a mic drop workshop and different webinars. She does a mic drop academy that's a 10-week intensive. I did that last year and I did it a few years into my speaking journey and really learned a lot. So, I love her, so I'm going to plug her. But if you're interested in any of that, I can introduce you. And she's just separately a good speaker to watch online. I think she's done a really nice job of building her career. Eva Rose Daniel on LinkedIn is awesome. She has so many tips for speaking, both craft and business and confidence and stage presence, just like really great posts. And she gives advice very, very generously. A couple of my other favorite speakers are Vika Talks and Chats with Yvonne. Those are on Instagram, but I think they're also on LinkedIn. And then if you haven't heard of The Moth, it's a storytelling platform where you can get a ton of inspiration. They do in-person events all over the US and I think internationally, but you might have to fact check me on that. They bring in people to tell stories, and a lot of times they'll do themes. So I think in February there's something about love or love hurts, and everyone's inspired to bring a couple of minutes of a story, and it's just everyday people, right? Like not professionals, and they're sharing on the mic. So if you follow their social media accounts, it's always so inspiring to see people get up there and share what's on their heart. So really cool organization. A book that I love that I'm reading right now that I had to throw up here is called Say It Well. And this author used to be a presidential speechwriter. So he uses his background in working with a former president and what it's like to actually put speeches together. Now, I find this super intriguing. Yes, this book is written by a man. We need more speaking books written by women. So bring them out on this call. So sorry that it is not by women. However, I really do love this book, and I think it speaks to a lot of the things we talked about today and just getting you to think about your stories and impact, and also just kind of a cool look into what it's like to work in the White House as a speechwriter. Like, super cool. A couple podcasts that I listen to religiously are the Speaker Lab podcast and the Mic Drop podcast by Impact 11. They are a speaker platform that doesn't exist anymore, but I think their podcast is still out there. I'm not affiliated with either one, but I love this podcast because especially the Speaker Lab right now, they're still doing episodes, but they bring on professional speakers all the time of varying levels at their journey. They talk about business side, creativity side, booking. Like, really, I've learned so much from it. So if you want a free resource, $0, the podcasts are great. All right, so I know we flew through this. We are at time, but I just want to say thank you so much. I know that this was a lot of words for me, and I want to stick around for questions and pop myself over to the chat. But if you have to go, I totally get it. Thank you for being here. If you ever have questions, if you're looking for a speaker, if you want to just share your wins or thoughts with me, please keep in touch. I love making connections, and this community is so special. So thank you all so much, and I'll stick around. Should I stop sharing my screen, Taylor,
Yeah,
so we
go
can
ahead.
see
I mean, you
everybody?
can keep it up for another moment, so if,
Okay.
or
Oh,
whatever, so
sorry.
people could find you. It's okay. Can we just get like a little like confetti in the chat, a round of applause, anything that you absolutely loved about that? Like, put that in the chat. That was so amazing. I have so many notes myself. I'm feeling inspired. I'm like, I wish I didn't have plans tonight because I would just go and, like my ADHD brain is like, let me just dive right into this and like make a full new page on my website for this. So this was awesome. It also, I'm going to put a couple of links in the chat. There were so many fun things happening in the chat. So I'm definitely going to save the chat myself. But I want to put in three other just resources that I wanted to plug while we're here because they came up in the chat. One is there's another session like this format that Danielle and the community had hosted specifically about landing podcast features. So if that's something you're interested in on that speaking journey, would highly recommend that one. There's one about TEDx speaking as well. And then I want to point folks to some podcasting opportunities that are inside of the community if that's of interest too, as you continue on your speaking journey. And then I'm going to just share a couple of other links here. If you want to host an event like this is how, the link for that, blah, blah, blah. But this was amazing. Thank you so much, Tiana. And we definitely have a couple of questions here in the chat. I can stick around for another 3-ish minutes, and I do need to do something before 3:15. So we will stay in the room for another 3 minutes, and maybe just if there's a specific question. It does seem like pricing and how much money a full-time speaker can make has come up maybe two
Yeah.
or three times in the chat. So maybe that's a good one to pick up on.
Yep. It's so funny because when I started speaking, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't put the slide in about income. So I'm glad that you brought this up. So I'm trying to pull up the exact question, but I assume it's like how much you can make as a speaker, right? And what are the
Yeah.
tiers? So the it I hate this answer. It really depends, but I will say the kind of sections of income that I was taught when I started was if you're a beginner, you might start out speaking for free. Let's be real. I did the same thing. Up to about, I would say, 5,000 per keynote. If you're intermediate, I think I was told like 5 to 10 and then advanced 10K and up. There are speakers who make a lot of money from this. I will say I am not like at that level yet in my own career. Like I'll be so transparent with you. I also primarily speak for higher education. So I'll, be open and say that you might be capped in certain markets, right? Like if you're speaking only in higher ed, their budgets might be smaller. That's also not the case for every higher education institution. And don't sleep on community colleges because there's a lot of opportunities there as well, not just the big name D1 schools. In fact, most of the schools I speak at are not D1 big name schools. So, kind of a surprising thing. But it really depends. I mean, I've spoken for some of the biggest organizations in the world, and one time they didn't pay me at all. One time they paid below what I would get, maybe for a college gig. Sometimes a college gig will come out with this massive budget because they just got a grant from whoever and they have money to spend. So it really depends on each individual event, which I know is like not a great answer, but the hopeful part of this is there's a lot of money to be made. I have speaker friends who their rate is 10K or 15K for a 1 hour speech, right? And for some of us, it can seem like a lot of money, but when you are out there traveling and paying for travel, and this is your lifestyle, and you're putting a lot of work and effort and expertise into what you do, it's worth it. My hope for everyone is that we can all be making 10K per 1 hour speech, right? And maybe someone on this call is making way more than that, and maybe someone's making way less. But I would say there's a lot of opportunity, and don't be discouraged because, you know, the other thing that before I forget is that conferences sometimes won't pay a lot. Like sometimes that'll be free and it'll be for exposure. And it's always up to you whether you want to do those things. I think speaking for free is fine if you are just getting started, if you're pretty established and have the freedom to do one or two a year for free, that's totally fine. But always make sure you're getting something out of it. So if they can't, maybe pay your full rate or whatever it may be, maybe they can get you video footage or photos or a testimonial, or they'll allow you to put their logo on your website, right? There's other ways I think to benefit from this. But I hope that helps. And I can also send out, I think I have a list of sort of different income levels and things like that that you can make from speaking. But I would say those are the three areas that I was taught.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I'll just put in one more question that was from Kristen, and it was a little bit earlier in the session, so I know you talked a little bit about this, but if there's
Mhm.
anything else to add just around how you would market yourself and your message when you're reaching out. Is there anything else that, might be helpful to share so that someone says hell yes to your
Mhm.
email and says, oh, this is who I've been looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's hard because it's so individualized, but for instance, like I am a former magazine editor. I've worked in mental health. So if I find someone on LinkedIn who works in mental health or is putting on a media conference, you want to bring in the buzzwords from your own experience that are going to speak to that person. So understanding what words they want to hear. They want to hear media, I don't know, media executive, media leader, magazine editor, like put the words in your email or your outreach that are going to signify to them, oh, this is exactly who I'm looking for. I also think the phrases that I put in earlier, which I'm happy to send out, like I help audiences blank by speaking about blank, you can Mad Libs that for every outreach, right? It doesn't have to be the same sentence every time. So if I'm applying to a mental health conference, I might say, I help audiences manage burnout by speaking about positive psychology and, somatic coaching, whatever. And if it's a media conference, that is not what I'm talking about now. Now I'm talking about career growth, branding, building, pitching, writing, creative process. So I would say like have a little fun with it and just use the buzzwords that they would probably use, speak in language that they would understand, and it's going to make it really hard for them to say no to you.
Amazing. Okay, and one final question.
Yeah.
We didn't talk at all about retreats. Any
Hmm.
advice? Have you spoken at retreats before? Any advice on a different approach for speaking at a retreat that maybe wasn't shared in this session?
That's a great question, and thank you for bringing that up. So I would say, personally, I love attending retreats. I don't have as much experience being a keynote speaker on a retreat, but I know that corporate retreats do look for keynote speakers. So I'd say you can apply the exact same sort of framework and consider it an event, right? It's just another
Mhm.
event. Maybe it's a day-long event or a weekend event. So maybe when you're pricing that out, you think about travel or you think about accommodations a little bit differently. I would say the retreats that I've spoken at have been really more staff retreats. So they're happening like on a college campus or at an organization where they're there all day. It's really similar to a conference in that way. So, yeah, I would say use all of these things to apply for retreats as well. Connect with retreat organizers and see, like, are you looking for someone? And, if it's a yoga retreat, for instance, maybe they're looking for someone to co facilitate with them, and speaking can be a part of that. It might not be so cut and dry as I, laid it out in this presentation, but I'd view it the exact same way as any other conference or event.
Amazing. So much juicy info in here. Thank you so much. Tiana, definitely make sure you save the chat if you have the ability by clicking the three dots. I can also send it to you, but I know the excitement post event can also be fun to take a peek at what was also shared in there. But thank you so much. Thank you everyone for carving out a little bit of your Thursday. I hope to see you for another one of these sessions soon. We have our speed connections coming up and many more events in the month of February and March. So have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye, crew.
Thanks, everyone.